Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Brighteye European EdTech Tour and our third stop. My name is Hege and I am Head of Community at Brighteye Ventures, where I'm doing my best to facilitate support and activities and profiling for our amazing portfolio of EdTech companies and for our fund, which includes hosting events like this where we can come together and share and learn from each other. And it's great to see so many of you joining from across Europe and even globally today. So please keep questions coming in the stage chat. Let us know who you are. We also have a small poll going on to find out what kind of fields you're working in. So we've arrived in Germany, I wish, and to explore some trends and characteristics in the regional EdTech market and landscape, we're thrilled to be joined by an all-star cast. We have Arnd Aschentrup, CEO and co-founder at Tandem Language Exchange, and Matti Niebelschuetz, founder and MD of CoachHub, who will share knowledge and experience on building successful learning communities. And then we have also Mila Cramer from Project A Ventures and Felix Klo from HV Capital, sharing some EdTech VC perspective on the region, all hosted by our very own Brighteye partner, Ben. But first of all, I'm very happy to leave the floor to Rhys Spence, Head of Research at Brighteye, who will share some facts and findings from the European EdTech funding report, with, of course, a special focus on Germany. Take it away, Rhys.
Thank you very much, Hege. It's great to be here and speaking with you all today. As some of you might know, Brighteye is the most active EdTech focused fund in Europe, investing in 7 to 10 companies every year at seed and Series A. The companies that we work with help people to learn and grow, and our interests span the early years through to lifelong learning and everything in between, and we do have interests in related sectors too. Our team really specialise in helping companies to internationalise and scale across countries, cultures, languages, institutional barriers, and anything else they might come across in those journeys. So today, I'll be speaking through some of the headlines from our funding report released in late January, pulling out some of the key findings and putting a Germany lens on them where appropriate, and pulling out some relevant 2021 updates as well. The report, which we put together each year, looks at the trends, progress and prospects of the European EdTech funding landscape. So, as everyone knows, while 2020 was a very difficult year, but it was also a very active time for education and learning technology. It was effectively the biggest possible forced trial of EdTech and learning tech, and we fully anticipate many of the changes made to be continued for the longer term, as learners, institutions and corporations develop blended learning approaches for the future, and flexible working becomes normalized. We expect there to be a gradual rebalancing, therefore, in effect, between spending on offline academic resources versus digital learning. And at the moment, 95% of academic resources still go to offline learning, while 50% of learning is expected to happen digitally in the next 3 years. And that disparity is worth about $2.7 trillion. It's not surprising, with that in mind, that EdTech funding in Europe reached record levels in 2020, with $711 million raised across a record number of transactions. We're already seeing evidence that the European EdTech market is beginning to mature. $278 million has already been raised in 2021, and we're only 2.5 months into the new year. And if we continue at that rate, we should reach between 1.3 and 1.4 billion for the year, which is quick maths, around double the 2020 level. And while that's exciting in itself, the most significant side of maturity here is that this 278 million has been raised in only 43 transactions, meaning the average round size is more than double the size of the 2020 average. So $6.5 million compared to 3 million in 2020. And even if you take out the 2 biggest deals, the average deal size is still around $5 million. So naturally, we hope that this isn't a temporary trend and that it's set to continue. Looking now at the split of funding by geography, the UK maintained its dominant position in European EdTech in 2020, comprising 40% of total deals funded and taking 30% of the value of all deals. But the big winner of 2020 was what we've categorized over the past 5 years as the rest of Europe, and most notably Central and Eastern Europe. which snapped up 4 times the number of deals done and 12 times the value of deals compared to 2019 levels. Germany has gradually been cementing its position in third, but as you can see, it's also gradually catching up investment levels in France, and it continues to grow nicely year on year. And I think it's actually the only country on the diagram to experience annual growth every year since 2016. So it's really nice to see that kind of strengthening depth. But arguably the main message from this slide is that the breadth of European EdTech entrepreneurship is really widening, and that's really nice to see, not only for Brighteye but for the whole sort of ecosystem. One of the symptoms of an exciting area of entrepreneurship and the tackling of important issues is increasing involvement of generalist funds. And as you can see here, we were really pleased to see 2 German generalist funds, HV Capital and GFC, featuring amongst the funds involved in the most EdTech deals in 2020. And we look forward to asking a few more questions about that soon, later in the session. And HV has already, of course, done some EdTech business this year with SDUI. This said, the fact that EdTech-focused funds remain prominent within deal activity does suggest that a certain level of specialism does still represent an advantage to access and lead deals in the space. As we suggested, the EdTech landscape in Germany is a dynamic and exciting example of exactly the kind of activity we like to see and hope to see right across Europe. And of course, there's a lot going for it. There's an enormous home market, a number of well-connected startup hubs in global cities, consistently ranked in the top group of European startup hubs. There's an incredibly strong, renowned education system with 383 higher education institutions with renowned technical prowess, meaning there's very low unemployment and therefore a competitive recruiting environment. And of course, there's several other factors in its favor as well, including its geographic positioning and the increasing support that the state is providing to entrepreneurs. And of course, these conditions make the country a very attractive destination for investment, as you can see from the range of investors that we've highlighted here. And these 2 factors combined are leading to an increasingly diverse set of EdTech companies spawning in the region, one of which we're delighted to be working with in Tandem, and we hope to be working with more soon. And we expect these trends to continue. Deal count is rising steadily, VC funding is increasing, and the amount raised per deal is rising too. And you can see that the amount raised by German EdTech startups in 2021 is already around 45% of 2020 levels. And again, we're only 2.5 months into the year. So that's really fantastic to see. And we hope that trend is set to continue. Another trend that we hope will continue is the pattern of increasingly diversified paths to liquidity. They've conventionally been limited in the EdTech space, as everyone on the call will probably know, with the only traditional buyers being the large publishing houses. And to be honest, the conditions weren't optimal in 2020 anyway, given that revenue volatility meant that it was harder for would-be acquirers to value companies. This said, we did see a new wave of strategic buyers coming to the fore, such as Adecco acquiring General Assembly, and just last month, Renaissance Learning acquiring Nearpod. We're also seeing EdTech unicorns becoming acquirers, such as Baiju's acquisition of White Hat and Kahoot's acquisition of Drops. So all in all, it's an incredibly exciting time to be in the space, and really looking forward to hearing more from the entrepreneurs and investors in the thick of it in the session that follow. But if you'd like to read the full report and other insights, please do go to our website to check them out, including our report last week, marking a year since the start of the pandemic and what we expect governments and education systems to prioritise in the months and years ahead. So again, thanks for listening, and back to you, Hege.
Thank you very much, Reese. And next up, please join me in welcoming Arnd and Matti in conversation with Ben. I'll let them on the stage. See if we get them all to join us on stage. And hello, Arnd. Hello, Matti.
Hello,
and hello, Ben. I will leave the stage to you.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate you both giving up your time.
I think what I'd like to start with is just a brief introduction. So I'm Ben Wers, as Hege mentioned. I'm a partner with Brighteye and have been with the fund since we started in 2017. Arnd, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself first, and then we'll turn it to Matti and just obviously introduce yourself as a person, but also your company. That'd be great.
Sounds good. Yeah, my name is Arnd. I'm one of the co-founders of Tandem. I'm a very happy Brighteye portfolio company from Berlin. And so Tandem is the largest community of language learners worldwide, with now about 15 million members from all around the world. And maybe as a short intro, Tandem is actually two people who help each other get actual speaking practice in their target language. So maybe you remember the concept from your university days. There was usually in a basement a little Tandem group with a whiteboard where you could find potential partners to practice your language with, and if you're lucky, you'd find one. And so with Tandem, we've built a global software platform that makes this really easy and helps you find the right partners in any of the over 200 languages that we offer, and then use the app to practice together.
Perfect. Okay. And sorry, just before I turn it over to Matti, can you just give a sense of also the scope? I mean, the number of users and countries. I think it'd be helpful for people to understand.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much available in every country of the world with users there, and also are kind of interested to see that among the more than 200 languages, in theory, you could have more than 11,000 different language combinations between them, and out of those, actually 4,000 language combinations are daily active on Tandem. So there's a lot of practice in lots of regions of the world. It's not just English speakers learning Chinese or Spanish, but also lots of the small combinations. We've just recently crossed 1 million monthly active users at the moment. And I think the paper stack of all of the messages were exchanged is now reaching the moon, if you were to print it all on paper and then stick it on top of each other. And so, yeah, it's quite a lively community.
Great. And Matti, can you tell us more about yourself and CoachHub?
Yes, sure. Hi, thanks for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Matti. I'm a co-founder and managing director here at CoachHub. A little bit on myself. So I'm entrepreneur since my early days, since more than 15 years. And I launched CoachHub together with my co-founder, Janus, who also is my brother, and about 2.5 years ago. The reason why we launched CoachHub is actually because coaching made a tremendous impact on our lives. I had my first experience with coaching as a first-time manager more than 10 years ago, completely overwhelmed, and my coach really helped me to gain clarity and to organize myself, to be a better manager. And with this in the back of our minds, we said, you know what if we would make this concept of coaching accessible not only to the C-suite, but actually to employees and people of all career level. And that's really what CoachHub is all about. We want to democratize coaching for employees of all career level worldwide. When you ask for scale, so as I mentioned, we're 2.5 years old. We have over 2,500 coaches, top business coaches around the world in more than 60 countries, coaching more than 70 languages. So pretty much any language you can imagine, and raised a little over 50 million euro in funding. And we're now about 200 plus colleagues on the ground, mainly in Europe, but also across US and Asia Pacific.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for that. So just to stick with you, Matti, I think the theme for today is Germany, but also specifically the use of communities in education, and how kind of the sort of insight that I've had over a decade now of investing in education is that actually it's possible for almost anybody to learn anything if they just stick with it long enough. But a big problem in education is just finding the motivation to do that, right? We all wish we knew more things, and we all wish we had more time and to do that, and discipline to do that. And so, you know, one of the ways to harness people's natural motivation is to embed a learning experience into a community. And so we're very interested in the intersection of those two things. So Matti, I'd love to hear just more about how you think about community as part of CoachHub, and then I'll turn it over to Arnd to ask the same question.
Nice, cool. Yes, I fully agree with you. I mean, we are all human beings. We are all social beings. So basically, it lies in our DNA that this community feeling that really motivates us and can also demotivate us if we don't get the community support. So for us specifically, obviously, community is very important, and we actually look at 3 aspects of community. One that is pretty straightforward. If you think about typical B2C concept, and that's like the individual learner. We call our users coachees, but then also we have a network of coaches. And we really shouldn't underestimate the community thought for our coaches as well. And then again, also the one actually paying everything are our clients. So that's the 3rd aspect in terms of community. And for us, what is really key in community is, as you mentioned, on one end, it's motivating a lot. It's also for us, it proved to be a great source of inspiration. It creates a lot of accountability. So to stay with the maybe not so obvious example with the coaches, for them we are in a time in a COVID period, everyone is locked in their home office. So often your social contacts freeze. So it's really people desperately look for a community to exchange thoughts, exchange on struggles. Okay, what are you having problems with? How did you solve it? Peer learning. To actually join learning communities, group learnings, and so on, and eventually also like this team spirit, this feeling of belonging, and in the end, this feeling of a community actually creates the loyalty to your brand as well.
Okay, that's interesting. And sorry, just to touch on that, are there aspects of either the product or practice that you guys have implemented specifically to kind of build community among the coaches so that they feel less isolated, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have actually community managers for our coaches. So
really?
we that's even how we call it. I mean, for us, the community has two aspects. One is learning, peer learning, but also a little bit of scheduled learning, as well as social interaction, frequent webinars, frequent exchange, Q&A. It goes as far as we have a Slack channel for our coaches where we exchange. So we're really doing a lot in building this community, and we also get a lot back, because I think that's what differentiating you when you're a pure platform and you're purely transactional, or you're building really a sustainable, holistic business that is so much more, because then the community becomes part of your organization.
Got it. Okay, that's super interesting. All right, so we'll dig into that a little bit later. But Arnd, I wanted to get you a chance to explain how you think about community. And I should say formally, I think we've said this a couple times, but just to be clear, Brighteye is an investor in Tandem, so so I give you the easy questions. No, actually, the questions are much the same, but I would love to hear more about how you think about community, and particularly because as you reach scale, I'm sure that becomes more pressing of an issue.
Yeah. Indeed, I think you've really covered one key point. Language learning is really hard, and it takes a lot of time, no matter what you do. And most people don't fail because they've downloaded the wrong app or are starting the wrong type of course. It's really usually down to the motivation and sticking with a plan and walking the walk. And this is where we feel that our model has been really powerful and adding some really interesting aspect here, because it taps into a deeper social and emotional connection that you have that you're building with your Tandem partners, where essentially it isn't the experience where you have to get up Thursday night, remember that it's your appointment in the local language school, get off the sofa, don't open Netflix, but go out and do it, but rather make this a very natural part of your daily life, where essentially Tandem, just like WhatsApp, is one communication channel that's just dedicated to language learning. And I mean, one way we're looking at community as well is to say, I mean, at some point in their lives, sooner or later, everybody who's young today has to learn a new language. It will be pretty much a big exception if you can get by with just your mother tongue. So sooner or later, everybody is part of this community of language learners. And for those folks, I think there have been really fantastic first wave of new mobile businesses who are essentially reinventing the textbook for the digital age, who've essentially created fantastic grammar courses, vocabulary courses, and help you make the first steps in a language. But what users of those apps usually feel at some point, even after a year, you're not quite comfortable holding a conversation, checking into an airline. And so at some point you need to speak a language in order to master it. And you need this kind of social interaction, and you need the human aspect. It's not just how we learn best, it's also why we learn. It's what draws us to languages and the communication. And yeah, so far people are oftentimes then going to language schools that are expensive, not available everywhere. And with Tandem, we're really asking ourselves, how can we build a truly global, hyper-scalable community in the consumer space? And with this, tap into the deeper emotions that come with community. And as you say, at scale, this comes also with challenges indeed.
So and what can we, let's talk more about that. I mean, what are the specific challenges around kind of building and maintaining a community of, you know, at the 10 million plus people, 1 million monthly active users, where, you know, it's mostly peer-to-peer, or it's all peer-to-peer, and so you know, obviously you want to foster an environment that lets people learn in a way that makes sense. And so, yeah, I mean, what are some of the things that you guys look at? What are some of the things you put in place to make sure that happens?
Yeah, and it is, as you say, really the one most important thing to get right in a mass market consumer model like ours, specifically for us, really to create a space just for learners where everybody feels safe to make dumb mistakes and makes a little fool out of myself. When I'm trying to speak Swedish, it's usually quite embarrassing. And so it's important to have this safety and have this kind of dedicated space where I'm not performing, but I'm rather able to look eye to eye with other learners. And I guess probably the number one learning here is really that for us, community is really about the connection through shared values and shared goals. And so this is one of the things that we put front and center through all of our touch points in the app, to essentially communicate quite clearly what our values and what the community values are. Curiosity in other cultures, respect, and first of all, a joy of giving and a giving first mindset, and to drive this home. And so on the positive side, this is really then quite amazing if you can unlock this kind of power of the community, but also, of course, then at scale, it comes with challenges. I think there's this fun line that now software has eaten the world, and now all of the world's problems get expressed in software as well. And I think this is quite right for communities as well. So all of the different attack vectors you can imagine, you're of course then faced with when you're building a large enough community, and there's everything from Nigerian romance scams to Bitcoin scams in China to just people who can't behave really well. And to essentially protect the community against this has essentially been at the heart of what the product and our mission from day one. And so we've essentially on day one decided for Tandem to be a members only community, so that we can really make sure from day one that we're bringing people together around the same values and goals. And people go through a membership process and application process so that we can essentially minimize abuse that's possible in such scenarios before it even happens and before it can become a topic. And so I think this has been been quite important to make this model work at a decent scale.
Yeah, no, I think that was one of the more interesting things for us. Obviously, it's rare to see a consumer-facing app that actually creates friction around acquiring new users, and so, but you know, there's obviously a long-term payoff for that, which is that the experience itself is much more enjoyable, and so you grow a bit more slowly, but you know, ideally you retain people and they get more value from it, and so you know, I think being quite intentional about that trade-off. It was really smart and has paid off, but it's you know, obviously it's meant that you grow a bit slower as a result. Great. Well, and Matti, I mean, I know that for you, it's business facing, right? And so I think the idea of how do you maintain sort of quality and consistency in the community is a bit different, but you know, you mentioned that you now have a presence around the world, and you have to maintain the quality and consistency of coaches and coaching experiences across companies. I mean, one dumb question actually that I'm just curious about is like, does executive coaching does the content change a lot from country to country and company to company? I mean, is what coaches are doing very different? I guess that's one. And then more generally, you know, how do you maintain the quality and consistency across, you know, as you grow, basically?
Yeah, great questions. Maybe unexpected answer to your first question. Just the content change country by country? No, it changes person by person.
Okay.
Because I mean that's the nature of coaching. Like everyone is having their own coaching topics to work on, and actually it not only changes by person, but it also changes session by session and week by week. Only looking at my own experience. Of course, you have like some overarching goals that you're working towards. A little bit more broader answer, it changes also a lot by use case. Are you working towards a transformation use case, or are you working in a classic leadership development program, for example? And based on this, then of course the content changes. Globally, there is quite some consistency, as all of our coaches are systemic coaches, coach based on the CoachHub coaching framework, and the world is getting more and more international. So managers in the US and in Germany alike often struggle with time management, struggle with resilience. So topics obviously cross borders, and just like our coaches are sitting locally, also our coaches are sitting locally. And for us, really, our coaches, they are our stars. I mean, we as CoachHub, we present the stage to them, and then they perform on the stage. They are all super experienced. They all are amazing people. So we give them a lot of freedom, and we can do this because, and that's your second question, how do we actually ensure quality and consistency? We can do this because we are super strict in building our community. And I would like to build on Arnd's previous answer where he mentioned, you know what, having a common quality level and common rules is really key, and the same is true for us. So in the first place, number one, we don't let everyone in, but basically we always super strict. We only accept 3% of all coaches that apply working with us. So really narrow. Based on, of course, experience, certification, digital mindset, but also cultural fit with us. That's step one. Once this is checkmarked, we invest a lot of time in onboarding and training our coaches. So we have a digital coach certification, that every coach has to actually be certified before actually coaching on our platform. This is to ensure that we are all speaking the same language, even if we're not. So this is really key, and also it comes with a continuous learning approach. So it doesn't stop with onboarding, but actually really refreshing, updating, and supervise yourself. And then number three, quality assurance. We look at a lot of qualitative feedback, quantitative feedback, a lot of engagement metrics, a lot of ratings. So one top metrics that we look at, as a lot of other companies is NPS. So basically to evaluate how happy are our coaches eventually. And that's also one of the KPIs where, as a product guy, I'm quite happy, because it's currently around 80, which I have barely seen in my career, and I believe it's higher than Apple. So our coaches love their coach more than Apple users love their iPhone, which is a nice thing.
That's great. That's great. No, and just sorry. So, again, out of curiosity, when you say you have a framework in the back end, does that mean you have a playbook that all the coaches are running, or is it more like you're making sure that the quality of the coaches that go through the certification, the quality is very high, and then you're really, it's more up to the coaches to figure out, or to I guess perform from there?
Yeah, on one hand, of course, it's selecting the right people, and then on the other hand, it's enabling the people. And we do give a framework. For example, we always have an assessment where we identify the strength of a coachee. This is also based on this, the coaches can also identify the topics they want to work on in their coaching session. And then there are some guidelines. Hey, how do we recommend you to structure the first coaching session, and so on. So we do give recommendations, but we don't tell them how to coach.
Okay, great. No, that makes sense. So, you know, as venture capitalists, we're always looking for the next exciting change, and you know, trying to get a little bit of see around corners and get a little bit of sense of what's coming next. So, would love if you guys would share a little bit about how you're thinking, how you think the product will evolve over the next 12 months. Say, you know, what are some of the exciting changes you're making to enhance, you know, either the community or the learning experience over the next couple of months. So. Matti, why don't we just stay with you, and then we'll turn back to Arnd.
Yeah, great. Great, happy to. And obviously, there's tons of involvement going on the product side, on the tech side. So I'm going to focus on the community updates that are coming. In the next few months. And this is really building onto this community thought. So we are implementing our continuous learning programs. Almost implementing something like gamification leveling, where you can really go on your personal learning path. You can show to the community, and also senior people can coach junior people. I mean, of course, we're a coaching company, so we also have to coach internally and pool internally. And that's really something we want to go even deeper. And then also in terms of building the community, so building specific focus groups, building specific local groups, and really facilitating the exchange within the community. This is something which we actually identified as a great value add for our coaches, because they do not actually primarily coach with us to make money. Of course, this is great, but coaches are learners at heart. They really want to develop. They're social. They want to exchange, and this is what we're strengthening.
Great. Okay. Cool. And that makes a ton of sense. Arnd, what about you? How do you guys see the product evolving over the next couple months? Oh, Arnd, I think you're on mute. So, oh no, let's see. I don't know if I can take you off of mute. Let's see. Hege, little help.
Yes, I tried to unmute as well, which I can't, and we had this happening last time as well, so I'm not sure if you need to just go out and come back in, maybe, Arnd.
Okay, well, look, I'll okay, so Arnd, if you don't mind logging off and logging back in, Matti, maybe I'll stick with you for a second, and then I'll turn it over. And guys, if you're listening, I'm gonna actually solicit questions from the audience in about 5 minutes. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to those. But in terms of, you know, you guys have actually, I've obviously seen quite a bit of growth over the last 3 years. I think we chatted when this was really just at idea stage, and it's great to see how fast and far you've come. I mean, what specific advice would you have for other entrepreneurs, you know, particularly those incorporating some aspect of community into a learning product? What do you think, you know, what do you wish you had known at the beginning? What has worked out really well for you? Would be good to I think Arnd is back, but yeah, let's stick with Matti, and then Arnd, we'll turn back to you just to you know, in after Matti has a chance to answer.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. No. I will make it quick to leave some time for Arnd. So okay. Key learning in terms of community is don't underestimate the power of community. At the very beginning, we were acting mainly transactional and not really putting too much focus on the community. And then we were surprised, okay, why do people sometimes complain. Why do they complain about technical issues and so on? Until we realized that the big power is actually in leveraging your community, interact with your community, ask the community for features, and really make them become part of your organization, of your community as well. And the results were really amazing, because all of a sudden people are not critics anymore, but they become really involved. They tell you what to do, and they say, "Oh, no problem. Of course, there's always some technical difficulties, but all of a sudden they feel deeply connected, and they really spark the best ideas, to be honest." So key learning is leverage the community. It's a great asset.
That's really cool. Have you opened your product roadmap to the community, or is that in order to harness that? Is that part of what you guys are doing?
I mean, what we're doing is we're staffing specifically to support community, as I mentioned, community managers, and they're really there to embrace the community.
Got it. Okay, great. And so, Arnd, sorry about the technical difficulties. I just want to turn back to you. So in terms of exciting changes that you guys are seeing or planning on implementing in the next couple of months, how do you see that evolving?
Yeah. For us, in the recent couple of months, maybe the last year, one thing that really stood out is how much more comfortable many people are with video and live audio these days.
Yeah.
How the combination of Corona and maybe also airports have essentially changed the way people communicate online. And so we've probably last year in 3 months seen more growth in live minutes that we're delivering than in 3 years before. And so this is essentially one big area we're working into at the moment to expand the types of formats that we are offering on Tandem. So far, a Tandem, as it was intended, as a pair of 2 learners who teach each other, is something that we feel pretty good about, but we feel the overall opportunity to essentially reinvent a lot more language learning formats from first principles now that people are actually ready to do these things online is an open opportunity that we are pretty deep into at the moment. And so we are kind of asking ourselves a lot on how would we reinvent the language school from the ground up. And I think big trends in there, of course, then different learning formats and different ways how to essentially interact in order to learn in this context, while keeping our core values of being really fun and being really lightweight and consumer friendly at heart, and putting, as Matti said, the community first, because that is really what makes it special and what makes the model work. So this is probably the biggest area we're working on at the moment to really improve the experience.
Great. And I mean, just to clarify, you guys have actually seen, it's not just a general audio video comfort, you've actually seen the usage inside of Tandem change, right? As a result of those, so more video, more audio usage as opposed to text messages, which was a lot of what we were seeing before, yeah?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, video chatting with strangers is scary, isn't it? I mean, it's something that was super fringe just a couple of months ago, and people were, of course, more comfortable to exchange text, but it takes a long time to build enough trust to go live together. And now all of a sudden, like, everybody went through a whole Clubhouse hype cycle, and the world has changed quite a bit, quite fast there in terms of what people are interested to try out. And then again, also thinking about from the side of people who want to professionalize in language teaching a little bit more as well. What is essentially the Twitch for language teachers, and what is essentially the way for them to reach a big audience and build a name for themselves.
Great. No, that's super interesting. What advice, Arnd, would you have for entrepreneurs who are sort of at an earlier stage and who might be looking to incorporate community into a learning product? What would you say would be the key things to focus on?
Yeah. Maybe one thing just to repeat, because it's so important, be really clear about what your values and your goals in the community are. And I think they are oftentimes more narrow feels weird in the beginning, but it's actually better and leads to more growth than trying to be pretty vanilla and everything for everyone. So oftentimes being quite specific and quite narrow in your values and your goals can help. And otherwise, I think for a community play like ours, of course, thinking about which are the social retention loops that bring people back into the experience, that really create this ongoing dynamic in the community, and the essentially ongoing activity is quite important. So this is essentially the inbuilt superpower of a community model, and being very intentional about this from day one can really help start things off when the numbers are still quite small in a good way. And so to create enough density through these types of tactics early on can help quite a bit.
Great. Well, there's a number of questions I'm trying to sort through from the audience. I would say one is around numbers. So I like numbers, so I'll ask this one, which is, feel free to be as specific or as you can be without revealing anything you don't feel comfortable with. But it says, can you share numbers, CAC, LTV, maybe in average in your field and specializations, and what channels work best to attract users? So I think maybe starting with what channels, because that feels less sensitive, and then anything you can share around, CAC and LTV would be great as well. Matti, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think this is this sounds a little bit like this is rather consumer-facing aspect. I mean, we acquire clients that are mainly enterprise-level clients, and that's like typical SaaS. It can take ages, so I wouldn't look at typical direct short-term metrics here. And in terms of coaches, we have a highly specific addressable audience, so we typically work through partnerships. That makes customer acquisition quite easy. The difficult part from our side is actually finding the top 3% that actually are the right matches for us.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm sorry I didn't share any metrics because like CAC and stuff we typically do not announce.
Yeah, I understand. I gotta ask, but I don't know that I would share you. But yeah, there you go. It was there. So Arnd, what about you? What channels do you find helpful? And yeah, anything you'd share around more detailed stuff would be great.
Yeah. For us, essentially the growth story was pretty much around organic traffic. It seems like we've, when we launched Tandem, found a niche that solves a problem that lots of people have. So there was a lot of searches for what we offer on the app stores and on Google. And so it was in the first phase essentially just becoming visible for those, and now still expanding those. And so far, though, I can at least announce our CAC that was 0 so far, and essentially building own properties, and where I'm currently looking to expand this and put this into a little bit broader context. And yeah, so for us, really the app stores and also partnerships with Apple and Google have been really quite important in the early days.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. There was a question around, this is, I guess, speculation, but it says, question for the panel. A lot of community-powered edtech startups are aimed at consumers or prosumers. Do you see a space where these projects could work for schools and colleges? I guess, do you, I guess, stepping outside your comfort zone, do you see room for community-driven edtech inside of schools and colleges?
I could very easily imagine this. It's not on our near-term roadmap, and so we think it's a little bit out. But when I remember back to my school days, we had like student exchanges with a little town in Northern Ireland, and that was all very exciting, but also not everybody was able to essentially go for a month outside, but essentially partnering up different classes of pupils together in different countries could be quite interesting. Also, there's a lot of essentially inbuilt functionality with the Apple and Google platforms who are so interested in this space as well that would make this reasonably easy. It's just an opportunity that is kind of complex and a little bit adjacent to what we're doing at the moment in the mass market, consumer market. But it's, I think, long-term quite interesting to do schools and colleges really quite specifically. There's lots of users already in these areas who are doing this privately, but to have kind of systematic approach to have class partnerships, for example, would, I think, make sense.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Now that I see, we are going to speak to a panel of investors who are based in Germany and have been active in EdTech, and so I just want to leave some time for that panel. So thank you both. I think there's been some great insight and actually more commonality than I thought across how to think around community in both the B2B and a B2C context, which I think is super helpful for me, hopefully for some of the audience as well. So really appreciate you sharing your insights, and I'll ask you guys to click the leave button, I guess, as the next panel kind of comes on. Thanks, Matti. Thanks, Arnd.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Ben.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Right.
Thanks, Arnd and Matti. Ben, we have some trouble getting the other panel on, actually, so I tried to message you, but
oh no.
Yeah.
Okay, that's bad.
I think they can hear us on the other side, so I'm trying to get them backstage, but let's see if we can get them to log in. But I also, I've seen some questions for, well, we have Mila, so I will then introduce Mila and then see if I can get, welcome Mila. There you are. And I'll get Felix on as well, but I can leave you to get started.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I didn't need to pay attention to the backstage chat. This is my inexperience with moderating virtual panels. Thanks, Mila, for being with us. I guess I'll just start by asking you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Project A.
Of course, yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks a lot for having me. So, yeah, as Ben and Hege said, I'm an investment manager at Project A. We also share an investment with Brighteye into a company called Aula in London, and I've been with Project A for 4 years. And actually, so we're a seed and Series A investor. We're a generalist fund, but for the last 3 years, I've been mostly focusing on education, and so we've done 5 investments in the space so far. Both in higher ed and now also our first investment in K-12 actually, and
cool.
Which isn't announced yet, or I think the notary, which is I think a mostly German concept. So yeah, we have to go to the notary, and that's gonna be tomorrow. So knock on wood. I don't want to jinx it, but it's looking good. So yeah, very very excited to talk a bit about the German market. I mean, actually, the one we're currently closing is the first investment that we're actually doing in Germany in the edtech space. I think all of the others are either in the US or in other European countries. And I think that's because, unfortunately, the German education market is very slow still, even now with COVID. To talk about that a bit more with Felix as well.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think as we're waiting for Phoenix to come on, it'd be great to see. I mean, you talked a little bit about it just now, but it'd be great to dive into a little bit about how the edtech scene in Germany has evolved. I mean, K-12, honestly, even when we started Brighteye in 2017, I remember looking at Germany and thinking we were a few years away from being able to invest in anything in K-12 just because digital penetration was so low in schools. And obviously, you can invest in parent tools for parents and students that are apart from the school system. But yeah, we'd love to hear your take on generally how that's evolved and whether particularly in the last 12 months, whether you think that's made a significant difference in terms of adoption.
Yeah. So yeah, I think probably Felix is in a very good position to talk about that, because they just announced their investment in Stui, which is a software for schools essentially to accelerate their move online now with COVID. I think overall in the edtech space in Germany, COVID has definitely accelerated the space and also interest from investors. So we're seeing a lot more companies being started in edtech. I think there's a lot more serial entrepreneurs who decide to start something in education who before might have started something in a different industry that's maybe moving faster than education might. So we're definitely seeing more interest in companies, and we're also seeing way more interest from generalist VCs. I mean, it's always a bit tough as a generalist VC because I think you have to do more groundwork on the education space than you might in other industries. And when you also invest in logistics and in prop tech and fintech and so on, and you compare the opportunities, then I think rather often it seems like education is moving way more slowly. So that's what makes it a bit difficult, I think, for generalist funds. But we've definitely been seeing more interest from them as well over the last year, especially. I think other things we're seeing is one thing I actually thought was interesting, because when I thought about the questions in advance and about basically how education has evolved over the past 3 or 4 years, I think right now especially we're seeing quite a lot of opportunities in B2C actually, whereas I think in all of like all the other industries is the opposite. Everything's kind of moving from B2C to being sold B2B, which makes a lot of sense. But I think now we're seeing this trend in education that you basically empower anyone to just teach anything that you know to anyone. So and I think that's quite interesting, and there's like new social networks evolving around that, and I think that's another interesting movement we've been seeing in the last year. And yeah, I mean, Germany's a mess, to be honest, under COVID. I mean, yeah, it's just like the K-12 and higher ed system is just a big mess. So I think, unfortunately, we're not seeing much more opportunity there. I mean, I think STUI is a strong one. Simple Club by Holzbrink is also an interesting one, and the one we've been doing, or we're currently doing, I think they're all basically yeah, still benefiting from that, but I think in general there's still a lot of regulations in the space. There's own products from the government basically that really don't work at all, but are for free for the schools. So that's also one issue, that majority of the school system in Germany is free, which is great, of course, but that also means that budgets are very, very limited. So while I think there's tons of opportunities in, for example, student recruitment in other countries, so in the UK, universities are willing to pay really high amounts for international students. I think that opportunity doesn't exist in Germany because basically there's no budget for that.
Right. Yeah. No. That makes sense. And in terms of valuations, have you seen valuations change much? I mean, I think there is this. What we've seen more broadly is that there's a growing awareness that actually you can get to venture scale in edtech, which is nice and validating for us. You know, on the flip side of that, I mean, ultimately we expect that to impact valuations one way or the other. And so would love to know what you've seen locally in Germany. Have valuations in edtech, do they look like valuations in other sectors? Is there still, you know, is there a discount or premium, or what do you see?
So I'd say pre-seed and seed valuations have been going up, but the same as in other industries as well. So I think that's just the market situation right now. I think that's not necessarily specific to edtech, but I wouldn't also say that they're lower than in other industries. So I think in pre-seed and seed, they've just moved up as in other industries. And then in general, I mean, I think what we've seen when we look at new edtech companies, always a bit tough to find or to come up with comparables in other industries. There's tech company there's like a bunch of fintech companies that became huge in a really short time, and I think that's often a bit harder to find in edtech, but there is definitely role models. So I think a number of companies like Guild Education, Trilogy, there's obviously tons of companies in China. They've all gone to $1 billion in valuation within 3 or 4 years, with an incredibly short amount of time. So I think, yeah, just basically to understand that there has to be, there needs to be a bit more groundwork done, I think, because it's not as natural as in other industries. And then I think a lot of, or one issue why it's sometimes difficult to picture really big or really high valuations later on for exits is because a lot of education companies that exist today are content companies, and obviously like valuation for content companies is quite low because it's not super scalable. But we also looked at, I saw some numbers from Masterclass recently. I think their multiple on the valuation has gone up crazily since the round last year, from the round last year to the round this year. So I think we're still seeing that this is going up quite a lot too, but I think that's also why multiples are sometimes a bit lower.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, I mean, I think part of our thesis is that at the early stage, it helps to, you know, there's quite a bit of digging to understand, and helps to have somebody like you who's looked at EdTech and who's specializing in the space and can compare across companies. I think once you get to a growth stage, actually, a good EdTech company looks like a good, if it's a consumer facing, looks like a good consumer facing company. If it's if it's B2B, it looks like a good SaaS company. And so maybe there's a little bit more specialization for companies that are selling into schools and universities, but even there, it looks actually quite similar to other SaaS. And so but yeah, sorry, that's me answering the question that I asked you, so apologies for that. But in terms of local trends that you're excited about, I mean, we talked a bit about I guess are you looking on the direct to consumer side? Is there a particular sort of age group or opportunity there that you're interested in? Is there, I mean, I don't know, is there any kind of breakdown in terms of what you're looking for now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and in terms of the B2C facing, like purely B2C facing models that we see, I think, this approach of basically empowering anyone, like empowering creators or even people that aren't yet creators, to basically by making the barrier for them to create content for other people really, really low. I think that's something that we're very interested in, and that's basically, I think, a lifelong learning opportunity, I guess. Then the investment we just did, what we're excited about there in K-12 is basically giving students and also university students, by the way, the opportunity to basically learn in their own way, and especially for Gen Z, basically to learn, or for apps to be similar to what they use daily, like TikTok, for example. Because even tutoring marketplaces, I think that that's a very interesting model. And for example, Go Student is extremely
it's done really well.
Strong role model in Europe. But at the same time, I think there's still an opportunity to build a brand that's really truly liked by students, because basically it's them choosing the way they learn and not their parents or the teachers forcing it onto them. So I think that's something we're very excited about. And then we're still very, very excited about higher ed, and especially the combination of higher ed and corporate education, because I think there's not yet an equivalent to a guild education or a trilogy in Europe, really. And so it basically goes both ways. Basically, universities are supporting corporates and training their workforce, and at the same time, corporates providing content to universities to basically enhance the study or the curriculum. And I think that's super, super interesting. There's Multiverse in Europe, which is looking to basically build a new apprenticeship model where apprenticeships are also being offered with tech companies. And I think that's super interesting, especially on the German market as well, because apprenticeships are huge in Germany. So a lot of people go down that route instead of going to university and becoming an academic. So I think, modernizing that apprenticeship model, I think that's one of the models I'm actually most excited about right now in EdTech in Germany.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's actually my question, because obviously people point to Germany and the DACH region in general as somewhere where apprenticeships are really fully developed. But it seems like to some extent they have a traditional innovator's dilemma where it works really well for the industry, more traditional industries, and for more for innovation economy industries maybe less well, just because they're relatively new. So do you see white space there in the way that Multiverse, what Multiverse is doing in the UK? Do you see a similar sort of space in Germany for kind of new players to develop apprenticeship-like offerings that are more sort of integrated into the innovation economy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's a huge potential. There will still be some market education needed, because apprenticeships right now are more in traditional blue-collar jobs than in white-collar. And I think Multiverse is doing basically more in the white-collar space. But I think there's a big awareness of the fact that that studies should be more practical early on, and I think this is exactly what apprenticeships strive for. And so I think that's essentially the better model to just going to university for 3 years or 5 years. And I think another interesting model that we have in Germany is called dual studies. I don't know if there's an equivalent in France or in the UK, but basically half of the time you go to a university to basically university and study, and then the other half of the time you basically work in a company. So it's basically 50-50. and the reputation of that is rather low. So I think school degree you would still rather go for a traditional bachelor, but it makes a lot of sense to do it 50-50 practical and theory. And so I think there's also potential to kind of digitize that and offer it with maybe companies that are a bit more attractive to students than, because currently it's usually German Mittelstand companies that no one has ever heard of before. So I think that's also a really interesting model, essentially just making the traditional studies more practical.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time, and unfortunately, I think Felix just got caught up in technical difficulties, so was not able to join us. But thank you for filling in, and thanks for sharing. That was, I think, a really interesting insight into what's happening in the German market, and hopefully we get to do some deals together going forward.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you so much, Mila, and thank you, Ben. And we're so sorry that we didn't manage to get Felix on. I've been chatting with him, so it's just been very slow tech. So, but we'll share details, and then hopefully we can catch up on some of the sharings that Felix we're going to do. And of course, thanks to Arnd and Matti. And for me, just to say thank you all, and finishing off one event by talking about the next one. On 28th of April, we'll be finishing our tour and stopping off in France. And we'll share more details on that shortly. So please just make sure you follow Brighteye on LinkedIn and Twitter. And feel free to reach out with any questions. And we've shared some details in the chat. And we'll also follow up with sharing the recording from here with you today. So for now, I'll just want to thank you all for joining and wish you a nice evening and a happy Easter when that time comes.